This is the Misconnected Podcast. Let me share a story with you. A few years back, I started dating this attractive woman, and in the first couple of weeks of getting to know each other, we got to the whole what if part of the courtship. Like, how would you handle this situation? How do you feel about this and that? And what if you find yourself in a certain predicament? So the question of how we would react to suspected infidelity comes up. And I don't really remember my actual response, but I can say that if I was in a committed relationship and I suspected that my mate was cheating on me, then it's like, it's time to have a face-to-face conversation with the woman I'm dating. So like I would need to look her in the eye and tell if she's been sincere and honest with her answers. So that's just me. So I posed the same question to this woman I'm dating at the time, like, hey, how would you react if you thought your guy was cheating? And like, listen carefully. She responds by saying that if she thought her guy was cheating, she would go out and fuck somebody else as payback. I'll repeat the statement. She said if she thought her mate was cheating, she would go out and fuck somebody else as payback. After her statement, I'm on the other line because this is a phone conversation, and I'm waiting patiently on the other end of the phone for her to say something along the lines of like, hey, I'm just kidding, or no, I'm just being silly. Here's what I would really do. Instead, there was silence for a good 3 or 4 seconds. And I was thinking, oh my God, you can't be serious. Well, then it dawned on me she was. And I'm guessing on her end, she was probably thinking like, well, I gave my answer. Why is this asshole on the other line so quiet? I felt like this was a woman whose ideas and impulses are like firing bullets from a gun. Like, once the trigger is pulled, the bullet is off and away, and there's no turning back from that. The bullet's gonna land where it lands. Naturally, I had questions for her. And, I'm asking her like, hey, shouldn't you know for sure that someone was cheating on you before you reacted that way? And hey, why not just ask the guy flat out if they're cheating? And if you don't believe them, break up. Break it off. Then reflect on what could have gone wrong and, why this person cheated on you. And if you're still in need of sexual attention, then by all means, go out and have a dick or two. It's that simple. She didn't see it that way. So for me, it really begged the question of, okay, well, what other kind of irrational horseshit is lurking in this woman's brain? And clearly, I knew I couldn't have anything of substance, like a serious relationship with this woman. Her confession was like that single cockroach that wanders from behind a wall, but only the difference is there wasn't a physical wall. This was her mental wall. And take it from me, an inner city kid that knows roaches. They are not solitary insects, all right? The same applies, in my opinion, to very irrational thoughts. There's never an instance where just one crazy ass thought happens to roam out. If there's one, there's probably a whole civilization of these little bastards behind the scenes living in some irrational Mardi Gras, dancing around in the streets, catching colored bees on a balcony, flashing a big ass roach tits to the people down on the street level. That's just my opinion. So why do I bring this up? In general, I have a hard time with this kind of thinking, and the phrase mental midget comes to mind very loud and clear. And what this reminds me of is a type of underdeveloped behavior a lot of us see around the world, and it's not just in this country, in the U.S. We see it in other countries too, if you're keeping up in the news. And look, I probably mentioned several times in other episodes that I think this is like a microcosm of what we see in some public forums and in our political world, the social media landscape, and some reality TV. And for the record, I don't know if I'll ever stop banging on the negativity in any of these forums as long as, there's this high level of fuckery. Here's what I find detestable. It's strange to me. Like, I just don't like the immaturity with some adults. Let me rephrase that in a different way. I don't like how it's become fashionable, and I don't like how it's applauded and being emulated from one person to the next. It crosses boundaries. And of all the bandwagons people should join, like getting smarter, being more healthy, being more responsible, being kinder human beings, cycle after cycle of people still jump on the, hey, let's see how ridiculous we can be so we can get recognition and praised bandwagon. And God forbid if one person achieves some measure of success for, some new flavor of stupidity, the stupidity du jour with his or her nonsense, it never fails. There will always be somebody else or others that line up and replicate the same behavior. It's like nonsense has been franchised like a fast food establishment. And I feel like the term viral in this sense is really appropriate. Like, it starts like a zombie movie. It starts with patient zero, the infected. And from there, it spreads from one person to the next. And before you know it, you got some kind of epidemic or pandemic or however you want to look at it. And we've seen it in politics. We've seen it on social forums. We've seen it on reality TV shows. You may even see it at your job. I don't know, depending on where you work. And don't be fooled. Innovation doesn't stop short of technology. Yeah, there's Silicon Valley, there's Silicon Beach. Adults of all ages find innovative ways to be immature, petty, ridiculous, and fucking stupid. You need an example? Okay, here's a quick side note. Was it last year? Do you remember the Tide Pod Challenge where people were chewing detergent capsules for laughs and video recording it? Did that not elevate silliness to a higher level? Look, I'm not without sin. As a less smart, as a younger man in the past, I'm clearly leap years smarter than I am now. A few things that helped me, a couple of warnings that came from two people that deterred me from being just a dumb, stupid adult. The first was from my mother. And when me and my brother did dumb shit as young men, my mother would always say, or she would sometimes say, she'd go, hey, don't practice being stupid. Don't practice being stupid. The second came from one of my old teammates' father, who said, look, if you hang around two fools, soon you will become the third. Think about that. But yet and still, we still see grown people, adults, parents, grandparents, other individuals with platforms and positions of power, and they act ridiculously irresponsible with their words, with their actions. And it seems like the bigger the platform, the bigger the asshole people want to be. And I think the search for attention and the illusion of power and getting this kind of praise from people is somehow weirdly intoxicating. Here is where I think some people get it wrong, and here's where I think the misconnection is. I think recreational stupidity is somehow being confused with cleverness and strategy and cunning gamesmanship. And I also think the presence of some type of audience is somehow equated with the culprit, the perpetrator, giving some intrinsic value to their words and their stupid deeds. Like TV ratings, likes, votes, donations, shares, retweets. A lot of times these are tied to high levels of immaturity. And they're seen somehow as, I don't know, maybe it's some kind of social currency. I don't quite understand it. Here's how I see it. Let's reconnect the dots. If we lay this kind of thing out on the table and cut it open, what we are seeing are adults playing a child's game. And I think they're playing this game for a number of reasons. Like, number one, if you look at some public figures in our country, they do it because, hate to break the news to you, because they have low opinions of us, and sometimes deservedly so. They don't think very many of us are very smart. They'll get away with it, and they'll do it over and over again. And they're never, or in a lot of cases, rarely held accountable for their actions. Other instances, I think some adults are honestly victims of arrested development. And quite simply, their brains haven't advanced past an adolescent state. Or I should say an adolescent state of mind, despite the fact that they're chronologically older. These are people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s and older. Hence they're very, I would say, juvenile actions and words. Body gets older, brain stays the same. And then there are some that regress to childlike behavior because I think emotionally, their emotional constitution is a little bit fragile and weak during high pressure moments. So you have this person that seemingly looks like, walks like, and talks like an adult. They get in some high pressure moment of conflict or what have you, and they regress to some childlike behavior. And they say dumb, childlike shit. Moving on. Lastly, I just flat out think a big part of it, especially in our country, is I would say some of these childish and irresponsible instances of gameplay. It's just cute to people. It's fashionable. It gets attention. It gets pats on the back. Don't quite understand it. That's my theory. So is this dangerous? What's the danger in all this? We'll get into that for a sec. First, let's kind of revisit some negative attributes of a typical child. All right. Naive, impulsively emotional, narrow-minded, petty, dishonest, manipulative, short-sighted, and as loving and adorable as some children can be, the games they play are half-baked. They're self-serving, and sometimes they're dangerous. Kids don't know shit, and they don't know that they don't know shit. But they respond in certain ways anyway, despite that. As an adult, I know we have considerably more resources and influence and power and physicality than a child. So when you combine an adult's power and resources with childlike behaviors, they can be as deadly. My sister and I, we have a joke about this, but they can be as deadly as giving a monkey a machine gun with live ammunition. Some crazy shit may not happen, but chances are something crazy will happen given that circumstance. And you don't have to look very far where childlike behavior, I guess, kind of begets critical circumstances. Like, you've heard of flirting and marital affairs leading to STD transmission and crimes of passion. We saw in the last big election cycle in this country that there was hate mongering leading to political violence. We know at least one story where adults who behave with childlike behavior lose jobs and careers. They're devastated. So if you're wondering how you insulate yourself from this, look, I think you look no further than the sage advice from my mother and my teammate's father. Don't practice being childlike, especially when the stakes are high. You gotta parent yourself. You gotta control yourself. You gotta take a step back during moments of crisis and when you're feeling impulsive and ask yourself, what am I doing? Where does this get me? What are the stakes? Don't keep the company of fools. And for the record, there are many kinds of fools. There are rich fools, fools with status, fools high in office, fools with influence. Foolishness knows no boundaries. And if a person's dominating personality is foolishness, do not support them. Do not give them your votes. Do not give them your consumer dollars. Do not give them clicks, likes, or ratings. The theme of all this, don't be the third fool. It's not a pretty place. Okay, that's all I got for you today. Let me give you my usual blurb. If you want to reach out via email, the email is info@themisconnected.com. If you want to share with your friends and family or whoever, we're on all platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, Google, and YouTube. Twitter handle is MisconnectedP. That's Misconnected letter P. Instagram handle is The Misconnected Podcast. We are also on Patreon at Misconnected Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one and see you next time.